Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions, your premier platform for real-time global insights. Well, I gotta be honest with you, I could watch satellite animations like this all day long, and this is a sun up to sundown on Wednesday here, and there was so much interesting stuff going on here. Major players, we had a larger ridge over the southeast with a deeper trough developing in the Great Lakes states, and this is going to be our main player, this feature over here, as we look out over the next 24 hours or so. But meanwhile, on a boundary that was still kind of draped across this section of the United States, we saw huge storms that erupted in through here, stretching all the way from parts of Nebraska and South Dakota through Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and over into Michigan. Some of those storms in Michigan producing a lot of severe weather. In the meantime, the previous system still giving us a boundary that was running right up into this part of the mid-south to the northeast, also producing a lot of severe weather. And even just on the heat of the day, and yes, the south has been very hot, look at the cumulus cloud field just pop right in here and eventually organize into a cluster of storms right into this area. You know, this is just an amazing satellite animation to kind of pick out all the features, and it's a great one to use when teaching about how the atmosphere can be so intricately volatile, I think is the way I'd like to put it. Another feature we got to talk about in this video is what's going on right down here in the tropics. We got a lot to dig into, but I want to first take you to the most recent severe weather reports. If you saw my long-range update that came out yesterday, you know I focused a lot on these storms that were in parts of Wyoming, getting into Nebraska. But some of these storms, as they moved on across, the border of Nebraska and South Dakota, produced some really nasty weather late in the night. Again, this was 2 nights ago, but in Sioux Falls. I'll show you that in a second. Well, last night we lit the same area up again with a lot of very powerful thunderstorms that hit the same region. Meanwhile, while that was going on, take a look at this. Just the last couple of days, Michigan getting hammered here, parts of the south, and then again right over here, getting over toward Pennsylvania and into Virginia. Just a very active last few days in terms of severe weather. And if I just kind of put this all together, take a look at the three maps that run across the top. You have tornado reports on the left, severe wind reports in the middle, and on the right we have hail. We've had well over 1,400 reports of severe weather, over 14,000 reports of severe wind. Again, those are the blue dots in the middle here. And on the right, nearly 5,000 set reports of hail. And just in the last 2 days, take a look at the pictures that you see down here at the bottom. This is some of the damage in and around Sioux Falls. You have the shelf cloud, one of the storm systems that moved through parts of Michigan, producing some strong winds, knocking out power for over 30,000 people at one point there. And again, last night in the high plains, another round of big hail. And you can just see where our major hail corridor is right in through here. It's kind of even hard to see some of the boundaries of the states given how much hail we've had and the size of those dots that they put on there. So what an incredibly active year we've had in terms of severe weather. Just in the last 24 hours, nearly 500,000 lightning strikes. So I know a lot of you up watching some pretty amazing storms last night moving through much of the United States. But here's what we get in terms of rainfall. Over the last 72 hours, there are pockets of parts of Nebraska, parts of South Dakota, Iowa, southern Wisconsin in here that did get over 4 inches of rainfall, some places approaching 6 inches. But you can see the overall flow pattern. A larger blocking ridge here, keeping the heat on. So down in the south, it's mainly been storms popping on the heat of the day. And the deeper trough sitting just like this, taking storm system after storm system through this track, which has been our narrative here we've had since the end of last week about what this pattern was going to look like. So the big question is it going to continue? Who's going to continue to get the rain from this point moving forward? And we have to look out for more severe weather. So early this morning, this is what we're looking at on the radar. So our next big system curling up right in through here. We're going to watch this one progress toward Lake Superior throughout the day. The main warm frontal boundary is still connected here. And this is actually wrapping itself up around another low that's trying to exit off of the northeast. You can maybe see a little bit better here when I animate this. This is going to be a look at the flow pattern here midday today. So here's our next big low in the front associated with it. We're going to talk about the severe weather on that. But the warm frontal boundary turns into a cold front here and wraps up into that system. And just so you see this again, take a look at the storm systems that are lined up out here in the Pacific. We need to see what they're going to do in terms of affecting the flow of the jet stream. And finally, don't forget, we do have a tropical wave right here, and there is a lot of uncertainty on where this particular one's going to go as the steering currents are going to get quite weak. Some of the model runs from this morning, the European wants to take it right up the coast and let it strengthen, whereas the GFS, along with the National Hurricane Center, want to maintain tropical depression status and bring it right over parts of Florida, over toward parts of Alabama and Louisiana. So let's get into this and figure this one out. Early this morning, we have widespread flash flood watches, warnings. We also have just a general flood watch as we're going to continue to see storms brewing through that same area today. Storm Prediction Center, of course, you can almost see the comma shape to this. This is, of course, wrapping up around this deeper low with that, remember that warm front that stretches out through here. So we're going to keep a close eye in parts of Iowa later on this morning, stretching down into Missouri, coming all the way back into the panhandles of Texas and Oklahoma. But along that warm frontal boundary, still keeping an eye there in northern Illinois. And also, if you're right here along the coast, marginal risk of severe weather today. By the time we get into the day here on Friday, this is going to translate a bit more to the east as that system exits on out into parts of Quebec. And so you can see they're stretching from parts of Michigan in through the Ohio River Valley. And then on Saturday, take a look at this image. We're going to have to watch again for another little resurgence of a little shortwave that comes through Iowa and Minnesota. Again, I'll show you that in just a few moments here. But take a look at our high-resolution imagery here, forecasting out, the next 60 hours. You can just see the storms here. This is 6 o'clock in the morning here on Thursday. The radar, of course, lining up with this quite well about that time period. So what are we watching? Well, the main frontal boundary stretched in through here. Out ahead of it, a broad shield of precipitation in through this area that stretches from Wisconsin back into the Dakotas. So more heavy rain for that area. So middle of the day, it looks like the primary front by midday is going to be stretching right through central Iowa, right in through here. So we're expecting a pretty stormy afternoon into this corridor. And then the front blasts on through by the time we get into the evening hours, getting over into parts of eastern Iowa, Wisconsin, moving into Illinois, but the frontal boundary stretching all the way down here into parts of central Oklahoma and Texas. So all along this corridor, we're going to be watching for the chances for showers and storms. Meanwhile, if you just take a look out there on the East Coast, you can see that also today on that same boundary, we're watching for more showers and thunderstorms, some of which could be severe. Now this system finally barrels on through. By the time we get into the early morning hours on Friday, it starts to move into Ontario first. You can see that main upper level front still stretched right in through this area. And the real cool air is coming in behind this, well, at least a brief shot at some cooler air coming in behind this. And that system exits. Now, meanwhile, take a look down there in Florida. See that? That is our next system we're watching coming out, well, right now just north of the Bahamas and moving toward Florida. I'll show you more about that in just a few seconds here. But putting it all together, this is our next 9 days. What do I see here? I see a storm track slamming into parts of the Pacific Northwest, but really hitting into British Columbia. We do have our system today that's curling up in this direction, so that's going to add to the heavy rain you see there in parts of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa. But there is another chance for some rain that comes through early this weekend, and then there's a system next week I'm going to show you that goes through the same area. Now, the National Blended Model is picking up on this pocket of very heavy rain right down here in the Cotton Belt, and that's because of a tropical disturbance right in through here that is forecast to move into this area. But I'm telling you, there's a lot of uncertainty. This particular system may take a track right here along the coast as well, making this particular part of the forecast may be invalid at this point. So we have a lot to be looking at here, and it all boils down to understanding the upper level flow pattern. So check this out. As I animate forward, trough number 1 right here, by Friday morning, this is what's kicking off the system we just described. So certainly moving right into southern Canada. Now look, you can see the next deep trough barreling here into parts of British Columbia and the Pacific Northwest. But outside of that, very warm conditions through much of the United States because of the flat flow here. We do see that by the time we get into Sunday, into Monday, look at the ridge that is building into this part of the United States. This is the beginning of next week's pretty sizable heat wave as a deep trough digs down here into the western United States. Now, as we play forward, one system that I'm going to watch very carefully middle of next week is this trough right here kind of exiting through the central United States. This is our next big push right there, that little trough that could be bringing in, again, another storm system middle of next week to the same area that just got a lot of rainfall. That ridge you see right in there, yep, that's bringing in some summer-like temperatures right into the Great Lakes states. But the flow is unblocked. Everything keeps moving. See this? And by the time I get us out to the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, we are again talking about that deeper trough sitting here in the Gulf of Alaska and what it does to the flow pattern. Now, an interesting evolution over the last 24 hours is that particular trough ridge pattern has flattened out a bit in the ensembles. And there's a couple reasons for this. There is some strong interaction with what's going on in the tropics right now all across the Pacific. But we also see some stuff going on in the tropical Atlantic. And if I just step you back here to the 22nd, 23rd, 24th, we see this general area, 1, 2, 3 separate areas here in the ensemble showing up with potential for tropical development here. And what this is ultimately doing is it seems to be flattening out the pattern as it moves across North America. Now remember, we're also looking at an ensemble average, which tends to wash out features as well. But as this comes through and that deeper trough sets up, it's very much in the same position. So the heat will be on in the west. Some cooler weather does show up here in the eastern half of the United States because of this pattern. I am not anticipating a frost at this point, okay? So let's take a look at what the precip does, and then we'll get back to that temperature conversation. So playing you forward here, this is the first system we just discussed. You can see it moving through. This is early in the morning on Friday, pushing through the day on Friday. So we have a chance of scattered showers and storms all along this front as it barrels in this direction over the next 48 hours, okay? Getting us into the weekend, system number 1 exits. The GFS model is really high kind of on bringing in this tropical disturbance across Florida and then having it sit over parts of Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. The tail end of this front is going to help to lift the air in this general vicinity as well over the weekend. But if you're in Iowa, I need you to keep a close eye out on Saturday and Saturday night, because as you saw from the Storm Prediction Center, this area here has a good chance at seeing some storms as well. Meanwhile, our next trough is building into the Pacific Northwest, so this could be bringing in some coastal rain here to the mountains in parts of British Columbia and Washington and Oregon. Now, you'll see here, if I take you back across the country, that on Sunday afternoon and evening, the GFS is really bringing widely scattered showers and storms in through this area as the next big ridge in the upper levels of the atmosphere builds. So this is sneaking in underneath this big ridge. So the trough is out here, broad ridge expanding, and this is the beginning of the heat we're going to see next week. So make it a quieter start for much of the Corn Belt for next week after some storms over the weekend and of course the storms over the next 48 hours. But we do see that by next Tuesday into Wednesday, remember that trough that came in the northwest? It's now pushing into the Central Plains, and there's some indications it could produce a pretty sizable low pressure system maybe Wednesday into Thursday of next week. Now, it's pretty far out in the forecast, but we're going to watch out for that storm track because the atmosphere is really staying unlocked here, okay, in terms of getting the flow pattern moving. All right, come to the tropics. Now, this is the National Hurricane Center, and unfortunately, I'm recording this video before their 5 a.m. update or any later morning update that they're going to give. So they've upped this now to a 70% probability of development here. And they're currently seeing the track coming in through this direction, all right? This isn't the only thing we need to be watching. Remember, we were still keeping an eye on this corridor for development as well, which is very typical of this time of year. There are some model runs that want to take this right up the East Coast here and potentially make it a pretty powerful storm. And one of those models is the European model. Now take a look at the enormous spread that we've currently got with this. The biggest shift in the overnight runs is right in through here. Now I kind of circle this because I want you to know that yesterday, most of these ensemble tracks were going off in this direction. So they were all moving like that. And now they've made this turn such that they're doing something a bit more like this in the European model. And that's critical. Now certainly, let me get those drawings off there so you can see this again. Look at the spread we have right now in the potential path of this. The steering winds are rather weak at this point, and so we do need to watch this carefully over the weekend to see if this becomes Umberto. That would be the name of this storm. Not Humberto, it's Umberto. We'll have to watch this one very carefully. I would say the entire southeast coast is in play for the potential impacts of this tropical system. And like I said, we're not done yet. We need to watch the next system evolve as it gets over here through the Lesser Antilles into the Caribbean to see where it's going to go. I can't give you much guidance beyond this because the steering flow is not yet fully resolved. And I'll just tell you, though, that the ocean is plenty warm to be producing some pretty powerful systems for this time of year. So we need to keep a very close eye on the tropics over the next week or so. All right. Looking specifically at week 2, just to let you know what the models are saying, you can see the influence of that deeper trough coming in here, sending a lot of the wetter conditions here into the western coast of North America, specifically there into Canada. But again, we do see a robust signal here for that system I pointed out to you that was coming through next Wednesday and Thursday, so I wanted to point that out. And in the south, outside of some tropical activity, things could be quite dry for that region, all right? Now, to finish this up, I want to talk about temperatures. This is going to play quickly, but I'm going to bring this back and show you what we're looking at here. So high temperatures throughout the day on Thursday, still a scorcher for the south, okay? You can even see these upper 80s coming all the way into the eastern Corn Belt. Meanwhile, that first system leaves through the Great Lakes states, and look at the cooler air that's coming in behind this on Friday. So these are Friday's high temperatures. So the nation's really split north or south. Now at this point, our next trough is trying to come here into the Pacific Northwest, but out ahead of it, really some big heat building here in the Central Valley of California for this time of year, a lot of mid and upper 90s. Saturday, very hot again here, hot in the south, and we're watching that next trough work its way in. Remember, the flow pattern is unblocked. Sunday's high temperatures, Monday's high temperatures. Boy, this is like July type weather here across the United States. But there you can see it. This is our next big feature coming through. See the cool down happening in the Pacific Northwest? Well, as I take you into Tuesday, yep, hot in the south still. A lot of heat building out ahead of this. These temperatures, by the way, anywhere between 5 and some locations up to 15 degrees warmer than normal here. This is now getting you into Thursday. That's when the next system is really pushing through the mid part of the country. Next Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Now, even with these high temperatures next weekend coming into the low 60s, we don't see overnight low temperatures getting dangerously close to a frost at this point. So I'm not calling for that just yet, all right? But showing you our overall temperature patterns, well, system number 1 exits here. System number 2 comes in here in the next 5 days. Heat stays on under the ridge. Just saw that. Days 6 through 10, now our trough is fully established. Big ridge pushing through here. Some locations there in parts of Ontario could be 10 to 15 degrees warmer than normal. And the rest of us getting summer-like weather here in this part of the United States. But getting you all the way out to day 15. Take a look at it. This is when the trough is here. Ridge builds out west, so the heat comes back on. But cooling things down here for much of the Corn Belt in the eastern part of the United States by a few degrees. I'm going to say this one last time. I don't have any indications at this point to be wanting to alert you to the potential of a frost, sometime around the 23rd, 24th, 25th of the month. I just don't see it yet. At the moment I do see a potential frost event coming in, I promise you'll be the first that I'll let know. But with that, I'll go ahead and wrap up the forecast video right here. We at Nutrien Ag Solutions, thank you for your attention. Hope you look forward to all of our forecast content coming out at my.nutrienagsolutions.com. Have a great end to your week. Thank you.